Hi everyone. The lesson is Android Activities Part 1 Introduction. We will be using these tools and these developer docs for referencing. Prerequisite, you have to make sure to look at the previous lesson in this series and you can find the link to this in the description. In this session, you will be learning about the concept of activities, configuring the manifest file, declaring intent filters and declaring permissions. As usual, it will be discussed practically. So let's refer the developer docs. So if you look at Android developer docs, you can see this section called core topics, activities, introduction to activities. So let's see what are activities. So a few important things to note. The activity class. So it's derived from a class called activity, top level class. And in fact, in the previous practicals, we used activities. So, for example, when we developed the previous lessons, we were using activities, and every activity had a XML file. If you remember, under resources. So, in the XML file is where we design our user interface. So, so you remember that if you look at, okay, let's look at the previous lesson. So this is our previous the out project of the previous lecture. So you can see we got this output, and then to get this output, if you remember, we wrote we designed the user interface in this XML file, and this XML file and this Java file together was we said it's the activity, right? So this XML file and the corresponding Java file collectively forms the activity, and you can see the class name is also activity, and it extends from app compact activity. And if you remember, the app compact activity extended from activity in the API. App compact activity is a child of activity, and that's the activity we were talking here, and that's this activity we were talking here, introduction to activity. So now you remember, when you develop an Android app, the screen you are creating and basically the outcome, it is activity. So what you see here in the output is activity, and then you designed it using the XML and you coded it using the Java file. So now you remember what is activity. So what we are doing here is we are discussing more about activities, more technical aspects of the same activity. So it says, unlike programming paradigms, okay, let's see. It says, unlike program paradigms in which apps launched with the main method, Android system initiates code in an activity instance by invoking specific callback methods that corresponds to specific stages in the lifecycle. So what it says is, in normal programming languages, you will call the program using the main method. But in Android, you don't find a main method. In Android, what you have are activities, and you'll be invoking a specific certain callback methods corresponding to the life cycle of the activity. So let's see what those, right, in a little while. So now you know that there is no main method in Android, right? It's activities, and the methods inside the activities are considered call life cycle methods, callback methods, right? So this document will introduce important concepts about activities. So the concept of activity, the mobile app experience differs from its desktop, right? So of course you all understand the mobile app experience is different to the desktop experience you will get in an application. So for example, if you open an email, right, app, then you might see, you through that you can see the emails. Or if not, in a social media app, using the social media app, you might just say check the emails. In that case, you might directly go into the email page. But if you're accessing the email app directly, you might go to the home screen. But as I said earlier, if you access the same app from another app, you might go into another app screen. So that means, depending on the circumstance, the same app might be launched in one instance from one screen, and on another instance maybe from another screen. In other words, what I'm telling is, when you got a Android app, you will have multiple activities. In this case, it's only one. So when you have multiple activities, you you sometimes might start the app from one activity. In a different context, you might start the same app from another activity. So there is no, in other words, what I'm telling is there is no one single entry point, like in a traditional language where you the one single entry point is the main method. But here it's there's no one single entry point. You may call different activities from the app to start the app. So that's very important for you to understand. Then the activity provides the window in which the app draws its UI. So the UI what you see, so the activity will provide a window. So if this is the activity, it has a XML where you declare it, and that becomes the window at the end, right? So this window typically fills the screen. As you see it fills the entire screen, right? And but may be smaller than the screen. um, it can be smaller than the screen, or it can be floating on top of other windows, etc. In general, one activity implements one screen in an app. So if you see one screen, in general it's one activity, right? So if there are two screens, one and another one after this, that means in general it's two activities. So when I say two activities, what I mean is there will be two XML files and two Java files. So most apps contain multiple screens, which means multiple activities. Now, even though there is no main method, typically one of these activities in your app will be specified as the main activity. What does that mean? So, so what does this mean? It specifies one main activity, right? And what we said earlier. So this is another app we developed earlier. Look at this lesson as well in one of our previous lessons. So in this app, we were able to type some message and say send, and then it's displayed on another screen. So there are two screens here. We can go back and forth. So because there are two screens, now you know there are two XML files to design the two screens. Likewise, and then there will be two Java files. So there are two activities in this example. So then you got in your project, you will have a folder called manifest, right? So when you go to the manifest folder, there's Android manifest.xml. So when you look at this XML, that is where it declares the manifest file, and it declares the application, and it declares the activity. So because there are two activities in this project, as you saw, it has two activities declared, right? And typically one of them will be considered as the main activity. So in one of the activities, it will say action main, right? And its categories, it's a launcher activity. So collectively what this says is, if you run this app from say if you just start this app, it will select this activity as the main activity, right? So for example, when I run this from the run button, it will run uh, this activity. What is it? It's the name given is dot main activity, which means this one. Look at the mouse, the main activity, which means this one, main activity. So the manifest XML declares one activity as the main typically. But having said that, as I said earlier, you don't have to always call this activity. You can start this app from another activity, from this one straight away, right? That you can call it, meaning you can invoke activities. But when you say typically one is the main, that means if you just run the app as it is, the what you have declared as the main activity will be executed as the first screen, what you see. So I think it's clear to you now. So then that's configuring the manifest. So as I said, it declares the activity, and then it declares intent filters. So as you saw, inside every activity you will see that it declares certain things called intent filters, which is optional, right? So not all the activities will declare. For example, in this activity it declares intent filters to give some extra information to the runtime. But this activity, the second activity, which is display message activity, which is this one, as you can see, look at the mouse, display message and activity display message, this one, and display message activity meaning, so it's configured here. So for this one, it's not giving intent filter. So intent filters are optional to give extra information, such as, so it's a very powerful feature, right? It provides the ability to launch an activity, right, and give some extra configuration information. So for example, in this it says activity intent filters, and it can give the category and the action to say, okay, it want to send some data, and data types likewise. So these things we will be talking more later when we do further practicals. But for now, you know, when you declare activity in the manifest file, now you know that you can give intent filters to give extra information, right? That's good enough for now. So these are some examples. And also inside the manifest you can declare permissions, such as if your app, for example, if your app needs to access internet, right, invoke some services, access some features of the phone internally, then we can declare permissions. Once again, we will look at this in detail when we do practicals, right? So we'll be talking about more about security and permissions. So this gives the initial introduction to what are activities. So now you got some understanding of what are activities, right? So so we discussed in practically, but the demonstrations will come after this. Conclusion, you learn about the concept of activity and configuring the manifest file on intent filters and permissions. We didn't do a practical for this, but we'll be doing in the next lessons. We used Android developer docs. So what's next? Look at the next part to complete this topic. So we'll be continuing this and have a look at our other practical videos. So we are very excited to meet you in our next lesson. See you in our next lesson.